Howenstine, which is 514 Hawthorne Trail in North Manchester, Indiana. Today, I, Ashley Lichtenbarger, and Megan Frick, the camerawoman, are interviewing Alan, and his wife is attending the interview. We're doing this for the Wabash County Historical Museum. Alan, what branch of the military were you in?
I was in the Army, and more specifically, when I went overseas and actually fought, I was in the infantry.
Okay. For what years were you in the war? Do you remember?
Well, from March the 13th in 1943 till I was discharged November the 13th, 1945.
Okay. And what was the highest rank that you achieved?
I rose to the rank of PFC.
Okay. And where was the majority of your service?
Well, I started out, I was drafted and sent to an armored division for about the 8th Armored in Louisiana for about 4 or 5 months. Mm-hmm. And then they decided that they would, the Army decided for some unknown reason that they would make graduate engineers in 18 months out of a group of people, and you had to have a pretty high IQ, 125 at that time. Average was 100, and OCS, Officers Candidate School, was 110, and so we were well above that. I don't know how I ever achieved that on an IQ test, but had some great guys. We went to the University of Mississippi then, and we spent 6 months there, and left there in March when that program was washed out. I don't think the Army ever knew what they were going to do with that many engineers. They had about 150,000 over there. And in 18 months, it was a very condensed course. We used to say if you dropped your pencil in physics class, you missed your sophomore year. You know, it was just that. Of course, that's embellishing it, but it was an indication of how fast we were going. So we were sent to the infantry, and 94th Infantry Division at Camp McCain, Mississippi. And in the meantime, I was married. Melba and I were married May the 21st. Well, I guess just shortly after we went down to Ole Miss, or left Ole Miss and went to Camp McCain. And so then we went overseas in about August the 1st, right in there. And then we went on to Queen Elizabeth, and went, I don't know how much detail you want. Queen Elizabeth was a large ship, had 15,000 soldiers on it. Well, a little more than that, actually. But our entire division, which was 15,000, went on that ship. And it was such a fast ship that it had no escorts of any kind. They just went out through the ocean and zigzagged every little bit, and so on. So we landed in England. We were there for a while, and in Scotland, went down. We were in England for a while. Then we went over to the on September the 8th, we got across the Channel and went to France, and then we were in a holding position in France, Western France, for a while. And then the Germans on December the 16th made a last desperate attempt. It ended up being called the Battle of the Bulge, and in which, to give you an indication of what it was like, the United States now lost 1,900 men for about 6 weeks in the battle. I mean, killed 1,900 men a day. Mm-hmm. 1,900 men per day, that's a lot. And anyway, on January the 19th, I didn't duck quick enough and caught a piece of shrapnel on my knee. Wasn't very bad. In fact, it was probably a blessing in disguise because the weather was terrible. We were sleeping in snowdrifts, and there's no use in me telling you about it because I'm sure you wouldn't understand. And so I got out of all that. When I woke up the next morning in the hospital, I didn't know if I'd have seen the fellow that shot me, I don't know whether I would have shot him or shook hands with him. I was really, woke up in a warm hospital, clean sheets, the whole boat, plenty of food. Then we crossed the Saar River, which was quite traumatic, and then we went clear across between the Rhine, or the Saar and the Rhine, and ended up at Ludwigshafen, and then we were pulled back to refit, and by the time we were refitted, the war was over. We went down to Czechoslovakia for about a couple of months, during which I got to play on the division football team, and that was wonderful. I mean, we had waiters in a hotel and so on, and after that previous winter, when you're sleeping out in snowdrifts and eating frozen food and all that stuff, made quite a difference. And then I got to come home and see my daughter for the first time. Melba had a daughter on March the 28th, and I had never seen her. She was 8 months old when I saw her. If I wrote a letter to Melba, it would take 2 weeks to get to her. It didn't make any difference if you sent a cablegram or anything. And then 2 weeks back. So you really only got one a month, complete round trip and everything. And I think that's one of the big differences, now everybody has a phone and so on. That's fine. I mean, it's whatever. Also, another thing that I think many people do not understand is censoring. All of our mail was censored. That is, somebody read it and decided whether we'd sent anything home that we shouldn't have. And I only had, 2 or 3 things censored, a few lines out. And I saw the fellow that did my censoring, a Lieutenant Ford, whom I felt a lot. He was a very fine man, and he made sure to know that he said, I never read your letters because I knew you weren't going to say anything. And the main reason for the censoring, he said, I was surprised to hear this. And this was just a few years ago. I talked to him. He's dead now. But he said that, there were always some guys who were wanting to tell how cold it was and how many dead bodies were out in front of them and so on and so forth. And that was awfully hard on civilians. And so he thought the major part of censoring was to not let a bunch of stuff go home that, really didn't need to go. And now, of course, in today's market, why, there's no censorship. They pick up telephone or email and so on and so forth. It doesn't make any difference. But that's, now I would like to just mention on the awards down there on that sheet, we got 4 battle stars. That means that the 94th Division was involved in 4 major battles. I won a Bronze Star for valor in action. That means that somebody thought I did something a little special. The Combat Infantryman's badge was, I think that the only ones that I'm mentioning now are the ones I think are important. There's the Victory in Europe medal, and there's but everybody got those. There's the, when you joined the Army, you got one for being in the United States. You know, that's just Mickey Mouse stuff. So the only thing I have saved, and I have back here, is my European Theater of Operations. That had a ribbon. Are you aware of all ribbons?
Partially.
Okay. And that's the 4 battle stars are embedded in that. And then the Purple Heart, I got that for being wounded, and the Bronze Star and the Combat Infantryman's badge. Those are all. The rest of them are, you know, you see these generals with ribbons going up over the, well, most of those, you can't imagine what, they like to fill up their chests, I guess. Well, I don't think that that kind of stuff needs to be done. So
You might tell how you got that Bronze Star.
well,
He's very
we
modest.
we were fighting, and it was the day I got wounded, and we had a kind of radio called a walkie-talkie that had the great distinction of, I don't know how they made it, but the walkie-talkies were a wonderful source of communication until you needed it. And then the damn things wouldn't work. I was just, believe it or not, that deal more just seemed like that. So we had telephone wire on the ground between the gun. I was a forward observer for a mortar gun. And well, then all afternoon, and they were shelling us pretty heavy that day. Every time that a shell would land close to the telephone wire, it'd break it, and then I'd have to go back and finish it up. And that's the way I got
So
wounded.
why did you do that?
Well, because somebody had to do it. Yeah.
But somebody else refused to do it.
Yeah, we had a guy that was just scared out of his wits, you know, and he was supposed to be doing what I did, and he just absolutely couldn't bring himself to do it, I guess, and so I was kind of proud that the lieutenant and platoon sergeant asked me to do it, because I thought, see, the thing of it is, if you are clear up on the front line, right on the front line, and if there's need be to have mortar fire, then you call, the forward observer calls it in. Now, the last thing in the world you want to do is put one down the necks of your friends if you call them in short, and that gets into a bunch of technicality and so on and so forth. But I think I was kind of proud that they thought that I was good enough to, well, we had all practiced a little bit on this. They thought I was responsible enough to do that and get the job done.
Instead.
Oh, yes. Well, there was this one little town, and believe me, it was level. There was hardly 2 bricks on top of each other. Now, and so about 10, 15 years ago,
Something.
we had kind of a reunion over there, didn't we? Yeah, that's when Melba went with us. And
With your division reunion.
yeah, and so they had rebuilt the church. It was a shame. The church was a kind of, an old church, been there for years and years and years. And of course it got leveled too. Well, they had a fellow from the 10th Armored Division, German 10th Armored Division. And it seemed like wherever we went, the German 10th Armored Division was there to greet us. And that we saw each other quite a bit in combat. So they had a church service. The church had been refinished, and there were a bunch of Americans and quite a few Germans, and of course the town people were there. And our chaplain, who was an outstanding guy, got up and he called I think they had a colonel in the German 10th Armored Division, and he called him up, and they embraced each other, which was kind of a sign that the war was over. And so that was kind of hard for me a little bit because, you lose friends, but it was time to do that. And I've had a couple guys tell me, they still don't think that was right, but I think it was. I think it was a thing to do.
I'll tell them about the big party then.
Oh, yeah, we had well, you tell.
Oh, I'm not there, you tell me.
Well, we did have a big party, and everybody got together and drank a lot of beer and so on and so forth.
Ate a lot of desserts.
Yeah,
German
they
desserts.
ate a lot of dessert, yeah. It was just a good time. But, and then at that time also, another friend of mine from this bunch that was going to be engineers, and his wife was over there in Melbourne. I rented a car and went out and looked up the German cemetery. And we had gone to the American cemetery. And incidentally, one thing you should know is that when you see all those crosses at I don't know, Normandy, or doesn't make any difference where, that isn't the total number of people that were killed. They gave the families the choices after the war was over. They could bring their loved one home, or they could leave them over there. And I would hope my parents and Melba would have the say on that, would have brought my body home, for example, we had a fellow incidentally, he's from South Bend, Bob Nave. Well, this is kind of an interesting story. And he married a girl by the name of Malva Cooper. And they had a daughter just about the age of our daughter. And Bob was killed just about the time I was wounded. And but anyway, their daughter became Miss Mississippi. And was she Miss America too?
No.
But she was one of the top runners-up. I don't know, the Miss America isn't as much as it was at one time. But anyway, that was kind of a neat thing. But the reason why I brought it up, now Bob, I went to visit his grave. He's over in Normandy, or no, down, close to, closer to, Luxembourg is really where he is. And, but I could understand, you see, there was his wife from the south, his parents were from the north, and so they just, I don't know whether, I don't know if there was any disagreement or any agreement, but anyway, they just decided, and I thought it was probably a good thing to just leave it right there. And a lot of families did, but the point is that there are so many guys that were brought home, and of course then there were guys who were never found, you know. And I think that was the right thing to do for some families in some situations. And then I think there were other families who just decided, well, that's where he fell, that's where we want him to be. I don't know, again, I would have preferred, I think, to come home, but
Do you remember arriving in France and Germany?
but that,
Do you remember arriving in France and Germany?
oh yeah, yeah, and in France, we just crossed the channel one day. Now the channel was secure when we crossed the channel. We didn't cross the channel under fire, but we landed where you see, if you ever watch any of the clips on D-Day and so on and so forth, we came in right there, but there wasn't anybody shooting at us. And then we went down to around the Loire River. That's not the way it's pronounced.
Loire.
Yeah, Loire, yeah. And spent a lot of time down there, and then we went on over to Germany on the train across just from Chateaubriand to Luxembourg, actually that's where it was. That's where we started in combat. I mean, that phase of the combat. We were in a much less serious phase of the war over on the western coast of France. The Germans had submarine pens in Saint-Nazaire and Lorient and so on and so forth. And they were, of course, not wanting to give those up. But after the Allies got a couple of the ports, then it wasn't so important to have those, so we just held them in there for a while. And they didn't shoot at us too much, and we didn't shoot at them. And they weren't going anywhere. They didn't have gas enough to go anywhere. I think one thing was very interesting, to me anyway. We had, they decided to have an exchange of prisoners. So the way it was done was if there was a wounded German sergeant, let's say, went over, crossed the line back to the Germans. At the same time, a wounded American sergeant went back to his line. So when they got all done, this German officer, and it was considered so crazy at the time that the captain of E Company, and I had some friends in E Company, he was very fluent in German, so he was there, you know, helping, getting the exchange going and so on and so forth. When they got all through, the German commander said to him and to some others, well, the 94th Division has been a very worthy opponent, and we hope that the 66th Division will be the same. Well, we didn't have any idea we were going over to the Western Front at that time. And in about 2 weeks, or maybe 10 days, we were relieved by guess who? 66th Division. they had some very good intelligence, I guess, too. I always thought that was kind of interesting.
And we have one request.
Okay.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
The
I'll tell-
apples.
What?
The apples.
Yeah. I'll tell you one that I always like to tell too. That I had this good friend who was, well, it was the guy that we visited with every year. Well, when we first got into heavy combat, he was detailed. He and some guys were detailed. They had some German prisoners, and they were of course, they had them out in an open field. They covered. It wasn't very far behind the front, and so, it came 10 or 11 o'clock, and it was time to eat. These guys hadn't had anything to eat, so one of these German prisoners came over to Ed, and he didn't have anything to, he didn't have a knife or anything. He'd taken everything away from him. He didn't have a knife though. He had something like, kind of like a can of sardines, something on that order, much bigger. But well, Lawson, who was, like he said, he was had a little power. And he was drunk with power. He just took it and threw it out in the weeds. Well, then Ed, being the good guy he was, when it came time for him to eat lunch, he called the German over to him, and they shared Ed's Ed's lunch. I mean, I've always thought that probably was one of the
Tell
better
me the time
things.
you got in the enemy place trying to find apples.
Well, yeah, we, another guy and I, we were just maybe a couple hundred yards back in the front line. So we wanted to go out and see some friends of ours, and we had just changed, gotten into a new area, and we didn't know as much about it as we thought we did, and I must have walked right out through a crease in the lines, and pretty soon we're clear up, and we're in a place where it says Howenstine, which means that's a German minefield. Well, we turned around and came back, and I don't know why they didn't fire on us. We were way out in front of where we should have been. And, we were going to take some apples over to some friends of ours, and that just about did us in. Oh, it was. There were a lot of good times. A lot of good times. Well, they say combat is 80% boredom and 20% terror or something like that.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.